Yeah, Sakina, thanks very, very much. So, as you know, divorce is never an easy topic to talk about. It's the breaking of a marriage, a home, and importantly, a family unit. At the heart of it, children may feel they are the cause for their parents' divorce. The reality is that children could end up with some sort of troubles, worries, behavioral issues, or even both during the proceedings and after the divorce takes place. It is up to the parents, however, to determine what the extent of these issues might be. Unfortunately, parents can use children as pawns during a divorce without realizing the real damage this can cause in the long term. So how do divorcing couples manage all of this? So to discuss this very important topic, we're joined in studio by Shani Niekerk. She's a senior associate at Adams & Adams Family Law. Joanna, Kleovoulou, who is a clinical psychologist, and Melissa Dolphin, Rowland, who is a family and divorce mediator at Amani Mediation Alternative Dispute Resolution. So a real full panel we got here to try and unpack this. Ladies, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you.
All right, so, you know, divorce is never something, a road that anybody wants to go down. But unfortunately, let's put the stats out there, if any one of you has got it, to start that. How common is divorce in South Africa? I don't know who to take this.
Well, we'd say half of people that get married get divorced.
Wow.
So it's quite a very significant statistic. And that's the reality, that most people that get married don't get married to get divorced. So it's quite a strong statistic. And so that, you know, it's something we need to consider in terms of how this experience actually affects children.
Yeah. And this is a harsh reality. I mean, I think we need to put that out there first. Is that, so you're saying 50% of people who get married get divorced?
Absolutely.
And it's a simple, easy process to go through in the courts of law, but emotionally, there is nothing easy about divorce. What are the kind of effects that a divorce has on, first let's talk about the individual, then we'll move on to the children. What effects are we talking about here? Let's start with you.
Well, I think the parents are affected by a constant acrimony between them, you know, and the long-term effects of acrimony causes a complete breakdown. Most of my clients that I see, by the time they get to me, they are so run down and tired. The children, the effects that you see it at school level, you see it in their personal lives. It's traumatic for both mother, father, and the child.
Yeah, and it is. And I mean, you're on the law side of it, so you're the one who's working for the client and want to get the best possible settlement for them. So, but at the end of the day, it is an ugly process.
Yes. The truth is, though, even though I act for a client, as a legal representative, my first goal is to ensure that the best interest of the minor child is protected. So frankly, whether my client is a mother or father, their needs are put second. The needs of the child will be put first always.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about a mediator. Melissa, this is where you come into the equation. So as a mediator, what is it that you do?
So mediation, it's an alternative dispute resolution. So instead of litigating, you bring couples together to mediate the separation or divorce. And so therefore then, instead of them being separated, it's to bring them together to focus on the children, what's going to be in their best interest. So we look at parenting plans and looking at child maintenance and the division of assets. So we look at all aspects of a separation or divorce, but our focus is very child-centered and what's going to be in the best interests of the children.
Yeah, yeah. What does a child go through? Joanna, this is a big question.
Yes. So it's quite interesting. You know, the biggest variable that actually affects a child in coping pre and post divorce is not necessarily the divorce per se. It's actually parental conflict. So many people that end divorces, generally it's because they don't get along. We found that in the 70s people got divorced because there were extramarital affairs, but today sometimes it's because we're seeking happiness and we're not meeting each other's needs, and so the reasons for getting divorced today might not be the same years back.
Yeah.
But we found that parental conflict during the marriage and how they cope with managing that distress between them and not missing being attuned to their children during this process is pivotal, whether the children are going to get through this acute stress reaction, because that is what it is for most of them in the short term, that it doesn't develop into post-trauma and affecting them in the long term in terms of how they perceive themselves in the world, their sense of esteem, how they cope with other relationships in adulthood, and all sorts of other insecurities which could develop into anxiety, depression, all sorts of other symptoms and behavioural difficulties as children and as adults.
Yeah, you know, some people, I suppose there's always this conversation where, you know, you'll say, oh, you know, thank goodness he's or he or she is so young, they don't understand what's happening. And then there's the other one where, oh, he's going through his teenage years, it's making it even more complicated. And then there's that thought, well, at least he's old enough to understand.
Sure.
Let's talk through these myths. I mean,
Sure.
what age?
It's interesting.
Does it matter?
It does matter. It absolutely. Divorce matters on everybody. Even children in utero, they've actually found evidence in research stating that parents that fight a lot, often children develop auditory processing difficulties, for example, because they actually can hear the distress and the negativity that is going on between parents. Children as young as 1, you know, that's why the parenting plans are so important, because it depends on the relationship that both parents have been involved with, so the bonding process with both parents and child. It depends on the temperament of the child. It depends on you know, other traumatic experiences, if there have been hijackings, hold-ups, deaths, bullying in the school environment, how the child has coped with that, and how parents have managed to assist and be present in those processes will all determine the outcome of whether this child copes or not.
Yeah. The law, though, let's bring the law into all of this, because that's emotional and we are governed by our emotions. But the law obviously is there to protect children. So what does it say when it comes to children and divorce?
Well, of course, children are protected not only in our Constitution, but in terms of the Children's Act. Section 6(4) specifically of the Children Act places a responsibility on attorneys, legal representatives, that in any matter where a minor child is concerned, an approach to mediation, conciliation, problem solving must be followed, and confrontational approaches must be avoided. The Act goes further to say that there should not be any delay in action taken where a minor child is involved. But I think that's unfortunately that the written law only goes that far, and the responsibility is on the legal practitioners to give effect to what the law says.
Yeah, and that's the reality. Something is on paper, but in reality, I mean, how often do you see this actually playing out?
And that's the sad part. Unfortunately, I think, you know, some attorneys almost fuel the acrimony because it increases legal fees, because the longer the parents fight, the longer litigation proceeds, and litigation means money, and that is unfortunate.
And that is also, I mean, you talk about the reasons behind divorce. That's also one of the biggest ones, is financial reasons.
Absolutely.
It's a huge problem. When the mediation comes into play and there's a breakdown in the relationship, and the kids, of course, are in the middle of all of this, what happens? Do they go into foster care? Do they, I mean, is there a process where a social worker is then assigned? How does it work?
So when it comes to a divorce or separation, it depends on the unique circumstances of the family. So social workers become involved. It's a very holistic approach. You know, attorneys are involved, psychologists, social workers, depending on what is going on in that family's circumstances. If there's questions of abuse or anything untowards, then yes, social workers become involved. Otherwise, in terms of a mediation and putting together a parenting plan, it's to look at the care and contact of the child with the parents. So it's to form a foundation and a basis so that the parents can move forward and co-parent effectively, and also help them with communication skills, which is vital to co-parenting when you separate or divorce.
You know, one thing I've seen happen over and over again is that the children are used as pawns in this entire process, which actually becomes a game, because you know that you know you can't go anywhere. I'll take the kids from you. No, I'll take them away from you. I'm going to go have full custody. You're going to go for full. And this is an emotional battle that happens within this child. So, I mean, talk to us about that, because what does the again, I'll come to the law, but I mean, what does that do for a child?
Sure. You know, their sense of self is really very much informed in terms of being connected to both mom and dad. They're third mom, they're third dad, and they're third themselves. So when you are disparaging your ex, you're actually judging and disparaging this child. And you're putting the child in a position where they're having to choose, and they love both their parents most of the time. And it really puts such a strain, an emotional, psychological strain. Some children will start acting inward, other children will start acting outward. Some children will start becoming parents to their parents. So they become very concerned, very caring. They'll start nurturing their parent, when actually it's the parent's job to put their emotions aside, and really tune into this child and look at the divorce experience through the eyes of what this child is going through.
I mean, you'll find that a lot of the times that the child does express him or herself and says, I don't want to go to mommy, or I don't want to go to daddy, I just want to stay with you, please don't let me go.
Sure.
However, by law, you
Yes.
have to share them. Who listens to the child?
Yes. So what is important is we need to understand what is the child trying to say. Are they saying, I don't want to go to the other parent because what are the circumstances there? Are they, is it a hostile environment? Is it an uncomfortable environment? Is there something about that space that the child is not feeling comfortable with? Is the child wanting to stay because they're afraid that this parent is not coping very well? Yeah. So they often become very clingy, or they become very concerned and worried about this parent. Maybe this parent's environment is a lot more, you often see it with teenagers, it's a luxurious home, lots of...
a lot easier, lots of time on your phone.
Absolutely, it's the good parent that gets them to do whatever they like with lots of freedoms. And often we need to check in terms of what is the child saying and what is the underlying agenda. And we need to then discuss it with the holistic team. What is going on here? Let's see if we can work together. And that the parents really encourage the connection with the other parent, because it is important to foster quality time with the other parent, provided that there isn't something that's compromising the child's safety and the child not feeling compromised psychologically and physically as well.
Yeah. You know, there always used to be an issue, and I remember it quite clearly, that the law would really favour the mother, and the kids would go with the mother, and you know, whatever the mother wants, the mother gets. Things have changed, haven't they?
Things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
The Children's Act doesn't give preference to a mother or father at all.
Yeah.
It basically all boils down to the best interest of that child, and whether the best interest is then with the mom or the father is irrelevant. I think what a lot of clients ask me is, when can my child choose? And that's where the Act comes in. Section 10 of the Act says that a child that is of such an age of maturity should participate, and that child's views should be given due consideration. Now, what people should remember is that that does not mean that a child can choose. It means that a child's views should be taken into consideration.
At what approximate age? I mean, what age is a kid at maturity?
I think that's almost impossible to say, because each child should be determined and looked at as an individual. Some children are quite mature at 6, and others aren't even mature at 18.
Yeah. Wow, that puts a spanner in the works then, doesn't it? So you don't necessarily know. In terms of, I mean, the mediation route, has it helped? I mean, when we talk mediation, is it something where you can actually try and stop the divorce from going ahead?
Look, I mean, mediation it's growing. It's growing in South Africa. We're behind in terms of the rest of the world, but it's growing. And in terms of mediation, so mediation doesn't stop the separation or divorce. However, in my practice, let's say, in terms of an assessment session, should a couple come in and wanting to find out about mediation but they're not ready, then one would refer them for couples therapy or to go for therapy before they start initiating divorce proceedings. It's important to find out where that couple is at and empower them with the right tools, so that divorce isn't their only option. Sometimes people don't think about or don't realise what their options actually are, in terms of, okay, let's go try some therapy, let's go and see if we can work on this.
Yeah, and it is important. There are cases where it is much better to separate the couple, and you know, for children to be watching their parents fighting all day long, every single day, it can't be a healthy environment to grow up in.
It's not healthy. We were actually talking about this just now, and it's, you know, it rather for children to grow up knowing what a relationship should be, than having parents who stay together and then causing negative impacts on the children going forward.
A lot of people can't afford a good lawyer in any divorce case. So the divorce is going ahead, and yet the cost of a lawyer is frightfully expensive. I mean, from what I believe, even a telephone call is charged, an email is charged per word. I mean, it just gets that ridiculous. So at the end of the day, it always seems that the one party who has the more money gets a better settlement than the other. How do you advise somebody who can't afford that good law to actually go through and get a fair divorce in their favour?
Well, that's a tough one.
It is tough, but it's real.
Money talks. But I think I can only speak from our perspective, from our firm, that we do not overcharge clients. In fact, we have tried to determine the needs of a client and try to determine a fee and a rate that suits that person's budget to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But there's always legal aid and what do you call it, the legal practice council for pro bono work. And I would suggest that people who are completely unable to afford an attorney to use the resources that the government has made available to them.
The longer a divorce goes on, the more effect it has on a kid. Would you say that's a fair
definite
theory?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you know you're going to get in that situation, just get it over as fast as possible. Would that be the best advice?
So that's what we're saying, is that the more the conflict lingers, the more it puts strain not only on the parents but everybody else involved, extended family members, the children. It becomes a ripple effect on their whole system.
Yeah.
And it starts wearing away at their capacity to cope and their ability to be resilient. It affects their ability to cope at school, their ability to function with their peers. So it starts to chip away at their psychic or their psychological well-being.
Yeah. Let's give you a moment each to have a closing word on this topic. And I mean, just some takeaways for people that are going through this, the effects on the children, how they can get around it. What is the best advice you can give? First to you, Shani.
I would just say that a settlement is only possible if both parties are actually cooperating. And parents should remember to use the resources. There are psychologists who assist in getting the voice of the child out. But to remember that no child can choose. And it is unfair to expect a child to choose a parent. The court remains the upper guardian. And the upper guardian will determine what the best interest of that child is. So parents should take a step back and actually determine what is really in the interest of that child.
Melissa?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about the child. I think that if you can if you make your divorce or separation very child-centered and focused, and the money aspects take a back seat, and and you have somebody that's supporting you, psychologists, social workers, mediators, attorneys, you are able to do that. If you focus in on the children, it really is possible and doable.
And finally, Joanna.
Most parents don't want to harm their children intentionally. So if we can really keep our children's well-being in mind and have that in the forefront of this process, things can transform. And in fact, the outcome of the divorce might be what's best for everybody.
Yeah. Ladies, thank you so much. I know it's the tip of the iceberg on a very, very intricate and delicate conversation. But divorce, the effects on children. Shani van Niekerk, a senior associate at Adams & Adams Family Law. Joanna Kleovoulou, who is a clinical psychologist, and Melissa Rowland, who is a divorce mediator, talking to us about the impact and effect of divorce on children.